Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're jumping into something that I think resonates with, well, pretty much everyone dealing with just too much information.
Definitely. Information overload is real.
It is. We're looking at Darren Lester's, Dasbo's latest piece on Google's NotebookLM. He's calling it a potentially game-changing personal AI research assistant.
And Dasbo's someone to listen to on this. If you're in the enterprise cloud world, you probably know the name. Highly respected architect.
Right, and he has this incredible habit, almost a compulsion for documenting his own learning.
Yeah, he talks about having tens of thousands of pages of his own documentation. It's pretty amazing.
It really sets the stage for why he'd be interested in a tool like NotebookLM. It shows how much he values structured understanding.
Exactly. So this tool, NotebookLM, the core idea is taking all your sources, think documents, presentations, PDFs, web links, even YouTube videos.
All that stuff you gather when you're trying to learn something new.
Right. And it transforms them into genuinely useful formats.
Formats like study guides, briefing notes.
Mind maps, FAQs, all generated from your content.
And the one that really jumps out, the one Dasbo seems most excited about, is generating two-person audio podcasts from the material.
Yeah, imagine that. Turning your research notes into a conversation.
So our mission today, dig into Dasbo's experience. What is NotebookLM really? How does it work according to him? And why does he think it might be such a big deal, especially if you want to learn fast and deep?
Just a quick clarification, Dasbo makes up front, this has nothing to do with Jupyter Notebooks. Different thing entirely.
Good point. Okay, so let's start with Dasbo himself. Why does someone who already documents so much get excited about this?
Well, he calls himself a learning addict. For him, writing things down isn't just about remembering later.
It's part of the learning itself.
Exactly. It helps him organize thoughts, make sure he's got it right, even if it, takes a bit longer up front.
I get that. But managing, like you said, tens of thousands of pages, that must be its own challenge.
For sure. So the idea of a tool that could sort of automatically create learning packages from all that existing knowledge, that must sound pretty appealing.
He calls NotebookLM a kind of futuristic technology that's finally here. Something that can take all these different source types.
Google Docs, slides, PDFs, Markdown, audio files, web pages, YouTube clips.
Right, quite a list. There's a 200 MB limit per file, which seems pretty reasonable.
And what's really key, he points out, is it uses Google's Gemini AI, which is multimodal.
Meaning it doesn't just read text.
Exactly. It can understand images inside your documents, too. He gives this great example of a PDF where tables were actually images.
Oh.
Yeah, and NotebookLM could still pull the data out.
Right.
Well, that's pretty sophisticated. It's not just file types. It's understanding the content.
That is powerful. And he has a practical tip, too, right, for tricky web links?
Oh, yeah, the pro tip. If a website isn't loading properly into NotebookLM, just print it to a PDF and upload the PDF.
Simple, but probably very effective. Okay, so how do you actually use it? What's the starting point?
He says head to the homepage, notebooklm.google.com. Pretty straightforward.
Okay.
And then you work with notebooks. Think of them as, like, containers. Project folders, basically.
Right, so for each topic or project, you create a notebook. You put your sources in that notebook.
Yep. And all the AI stuff, the summaries, the outputs, lives inside that specific notebook. Keeps things focused.
Makes sense. So you add your sources. Dasbo uses his own articles, right?
Yeah, he took the first 5 PDFs from his Google Cloud Adoption series and uploaded them into a new notebook to test it out.
So you can start with your existing content, like articles or reports?
Exactly. And he also mentions you can easily uncheck sources if you want the AI to ignore one for a bit. Gives you control.
Okay, sources are in. What happens next? Does it just summarize?
Pretty much, yeah. First thing you'll likely see in the chat tab is an AI summary of everything you uploaded.
Just a general summary.
A summary, but crucially with inline citations. So you can click and see exactly where that piece of information came from in your original documents.
Oh, that's important. Trust, but verify.
Absolutely. And it's interactive. He asks it specific questions based on his articles. Like, why should I avoid commercially licensed software in cloud?
And it answered based on his content.
Yep. Pull the answer right from his uploaded PDFs. He also asked it to generate questions for him, like ask me some questions to test my understanding.
Ah, so it can quiz you on your own material. That's neat.
Very neat. It goes beyond just reading a summary. But the podcast feature, that's where he really gets excited.
Yeah, you mentioned that. He sounds genuinely amazed.
He uses all caps. This is insane. The podcast is so good. That's a direct quote.
Haha. Okay. So what is it? A text-to-speech reading?
No, that's the thing. He says it creates a natural-sounding, two-person podcast discussing the content. like a conversation.
2 AI voices discussing your documents.
Apparently so, and fast. He said it took about 2 minutes for his articles.
2 minutes? Wow. Can you guide it at all?
Yeah, he says you can give it custom prompts before generating to kind of steer the conversation a bit.
Okay, that's pretty wild. Did he just listen to it?
No, this is Dasbo we're talking about. He actually published it.
Published the AI-generated podcast where?
On Spotify. He downloaded the WAV file, used FFmpeg, which is a standard tool to convert it to MP3, and uploaded it. Said the whole publishing part took like 5 minutes.
From AI generation to Spotify in minutes. That's really something.
It shows how accessible it is, potentially. And podcasts aren't the only output. There are other one-click options.
Right, you mentioned those. FAQs.
FAQs, briefing documents, which sound super useful, like an abstract, key points, conclusion rolled into one.
Okay, yeah, I can see that being helpful.
And study guides, too, with sample questions, essay prompts, even a glossary, all based on your sources.
It really seems geared towards digesting and learning from information quickly.
Definitely. And while those quick buttons are great, he does remind us the chat interface is always there for asking more specific custom questions.
So beyond personal learning, where does Dasbo see this being used? What are the big applications?
He lists a few key ones. Obviously, creating study materials from lots of different notes or articles.
Makes sense.
Assembling research packages. Imagine throwing in a bunch of papers on a new topic and getting a quick briefing doc or FAQ.
Yeah, getting up to speed fast.
Onboarding new team members is another one he highlights. Feed it client info or project docs. Get an overview podcast or summary.
Oh, that could save a ton of time instead of someone having to explain everything from scratch.
Exactly. And the last one he mentions is drafting RFI responses. Requests for information.
How would that work?
You'd upload relevant case studies, maybe some pre-sales documents, along with the RFI questions themselves, and let it help draft the answers.
Interesting. Pulling relevant info automatically to answer specific questions.
Right. Streamlining that whole process.
Okay, reflecting on all this.
Yeah.
Especially the podcast part. Something feels a bit meta.
Meta how?
Well, Dasbo's raving about how NotebookLM can create a natural-sounding 2-person podcast discussing the content in your sources.
Right. Hang on.
You see where I'm going?
Yeah.
Oh.
Because that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
Right now.
We are 2 voices discussing Dasbo's article, which is the source.
And he's saying how good the AI podcasts are.
So, wait. Could this conversation, this deep dive you're listening to right now, could we be
an example of exactly what he's talking about? Are we the AI voices generated from Dasbo's text?
Wow. Okay. That's a definite possibility to consider, isn't it? It bends the mind a little.
It really does. It makes you think about just how good this tech might be getting if it can produce something like this.
If it can produce this. Okay. Pulling back from the existential questions for a moment.
Right. Good idea. Whether we're human or incredibly convincing AI.
Which, for the record, I think I'm human.
Me too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But the key takeaway from Dasbo's article remains the same. NotebookLM looks like a seriously potent tool.
Yeah, for taking a mess of information docs, videos, web stuff, and making sense of it efficiently, turning it into useful knowledge in different ways.
It's about processing information, understanding it, interacting with it in a much smarter way compared to just, reading endless pages or trying to connect dots manually.
So, for you listening, think about your own workflows. Where do you spend time trying to synthesize information? Could a tool like this help?
Whether it's for studying, research, work projects, onboarding, the potential applications seem really broad.
We definitely suggest checking it out based on Dasbo's experience. The site again is https://notebooklm.google.com.
Yeah, give it a try. Upload some of your own stuff, see what happens. Maybe even try making one of those podcasts Dasbo was so excited about.
Who knows, maybe you'll generate the next episode of this deep dive.
Wouldn't that be something?
It leads to a final thought, though. If AI can synthesize and discuss complex information this naturally, what does that really unlock?
How does it change how we learn, how we share knowledge, maybe even how we think about creating content itself?
Something to definitely ponder. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.